Today, we're diving into a system that's teetering right on the edge. We're looking at Iran in early 2026, a country caught in what you might call a perfect storm of crises. Let's get right into it.
Okay, let's set the scene. It's the winter of 2026. There's a chill in the air in Tehran, but the real tension gripping the entire country? Well, you can trace it all back to one single staggering number. 1,420,000 Iranian rials to buy a single US dollar. Think about that. That's not just a historic low, it's a complete catastrophe. And this isn't just some dry economic statistic. No, this was the trigger. This was the number that lit the fuse and sent people flooding into the streets, starting with a group that, frankly, no one expected. In that group, the Bazaar merchants. Now, you have to understand, this is a huge deal. These merchants have traditionally been a pillar of the establishment, right? For them to go on strike, it signals a massive, fundamental break. It tells you that economic pain has gotten so bad, it's actually bridging the gap between the regime's old supporters and its biggest critics.
So, what started as an economic protest in the heart of Tehran's bazaars, well, it didn't stay there. It was like a spark that caught dry tinder, and the fire just started to spread, fast.
Let's look at where it spread. First, head west, to the Kurdish-majority province of Ilam. What we see here is heartbreaking and explosive. Funerals for protesters who were killed by security forces are turning into these massive anti-government demonstrations. Grief is literally turning into rage, and you can see the movement escalating, both geographically and emotionally.
And it's not just in Tehran. If you look at Mashhad, a huge city over in the northeast, their commercial centers are shutting down too. This is key. It shows us this isn't just a few random, isolated protests. This is becoming a coordinated, nationwide economic strike.
And then things take a really dangerous turn. Down in Zahedan in the southeast, a new group emerges. They call themselves the Mobarazan Popular Front. And they're not just protesting, they're armed. And they've issued a direct warning to the regime. Suddenly, the threat of organized, armed resistance is on the table.
And with this escalation comes a terrible cost. More than 29 people. That's the number of deaths reported by human rights groups in just the first few days. It's a brutal, stark reminder of the human toll, as the regime's crackdown gets more and more violent.
So how is the regime responding? Well, exactly how you might expect, swiftly and brutally. They're using pellet guns, tear gas, and just straight-up assaulting demonstrators. To control the narrative, they've pulled the plug, a near-total internet blackout across the country. And the message from the top, the judiciary is vowing decisive punishment with zero leniency. No compromise, no backing down.
Okay, so you have to ask yourself, how on earth did it get to this point? Iran is a country with immense natural wealth. So how does a nation like that end up with a worthless currency and its people in open revolt? To understand that, we've got to dig into the economy. All right, this chart right here, it gets to the absolute core of the problem. Over the last 5 years, Iran made over $193 billion from oil exports. That's a staggering amount of money, even with sanctions. But here's the crazy part. During that same time, the economy didn't grow. It actually shrunk by $244 billion. Let that sink in. They were bringing in all this cash, but the country as a whole was getting poorer. It just doesn't add up.
So naturally, this is the question on every single person's mind in Iran. Where is the money going? With all that oil revenue pouring in, why are we getting poorer? Why can't I afford to buy bread?
And the answer really comes down to priorities. Where does the regime spend its money? Well, a huge chunk goes straight to the military and security forces. You know, the very institutions that keep the regime in power. On top of that, it's estimated that about half of the direct oil revenue goes to powerful religious institutions. What's not at the top of the list? The public.
So for the average Iranian, this isn't abstract. This is their daily reality. We're talking about hyperinflation roaring past 42%. The cost of food? It's jumped by more than 75%. The old subsidy system is gone, replaced by a cash handout of, wait for it, $7 a month. Throw in crippling international sanctions and huge youth unemployment, and yeah, you've got a powder keg just waiting for a spark.
But look, this isn't just about the economy. An economic collapse like this doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's gone hand in hand with something just as corrosive, a complete and utter collapse of faith in the entire political system. Just look at this timeline. It tells a story.
Back in 2009, you had 85% of people turning out to vote. They still believed in the system, that they could make a change by choosing between the so-called reformists and conservatives. Fast forward to 2018, and what are people chanting in the streets? Reformist, principlist, the game is over. They're done with both sides. By 2024, voter turnout has plummeted to 40%. It's a clear journey from trying to work within the system to rejecting it completely.
But here's the thing. Just because people are rejecting the current system doesn't mean they all agree on what should replace it. Not at all. The streets are a total battleground of competing ideas. On one corner, you'll hear people chanting for the return of the monarchy. Crown Prince, come help us. And on the very next corner, you'll hear chants for neither Shah nor clergy. The opposition to the regime is real, but it is deeply, deeply fractured.
So let's pull all these threads together. You've got a full-blown economic collapse, a complete loss of faith in politics, and a divided opposition. What happens when all of that hits at the exact same time? You end up with a system in a state of, well, profound disintegration.
There's actually a term for this that analysts are using: systemic exhaustion. And it's exactly what it sounds like. It's the point where the state has just run out of moves. There are no good options left. Every single problem just makes another problem worse, and it creates this vicious, self-reinforcing downward spiral that's almost impossible to break out of.
And that's what brings us to this perfect storm. You've got the economic collapse, right? The hyperinflation, the worthless currency. You've got a paralyzed political system with no legitimacy. You have critical shortages of basics like water and power. You have international sanctions squeezing from the outside. And now you have armed opposition groups rising up from within. Literally every single pillar holding up the state is shaking violently, all at the same time.
Which, of course, leaves us with one final, unavoidable question. For decades, the Islamic Republic has managed to survive, to persevere through crisis after crisis. But this feels different. It's entering a phase where its very existence is on the line. So when a system is this exhausted, when all the old tricks and tools that used to rely on just don't work anymore, what comes next?